What's up? This is Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff. On today's show, the Raiders fired Pete Carroll. Does that mean Tom Brady is going to save the franchise? We will talk to Jason Fitz from Yahoo Sports about the Raiders and what happens next. Plus, the Golden Knights will try to do something they have never done: lose 6 games in a row. Probably more accurate to say the Golden Knights will try to not do something they've never done, because I don't think they're trying to lose their 6th straight game, but they might do it. More on the Golden Knights later. We're going to get into the Raiders, who now need a new coach. Here we go. The Raiders, for about 11 months, did everything wrong. Wrong head coach, wrong draft pick, wrong quarterback signing, well, technically a trade, wrong free agent decisions, ignored the offensive line, all of that. Did everything wrong for roughly 11 straight months. And then for the last month, they've done everything right. It started by giving the young guys more playing time, something they should have been doing pretty much the whole season. Then we really kicked it into high gear when they decided to sit Max Crosby and Brock Bowers. They lost that game to the Giants, ended up getting the number 1 pick in the draft, and now they have fired Pete Carroll. All of it correct. All of it the right decision. Maybe reason to be optimistic because they're now doing things they should be doing as a competent organization. Not quite there yet. I think they've got a long ways to go to prove that they can actually do this. But by firing Pete Carroll, it's another step in the right direction, which is realizing this is a full rebuild and everything is going to take time, not some sort of quick turnaround where you hire Pete Carroll and say, hey, let's go win 10 games right now, because that's not going to happen. I will say my big pessimism still is who is in charge. And I've been asking this, right? The Raiders haven't really given us a lot of insight into that. They kind of did yesterday. Their statement when they fired Pete Carroll said John Spytek will lead all football operations, which would imply that's who's in charge. But the very next words in that statement were in close collaboration with Tom Brady. So does that mean Spytek is leading all football operations, or does Brady get to veto something if he doesn't like that? Does he have the Trump power to come in and say, whatever you say, don't care, we're doing this because that's what I want to do? And I think it's still one of the biggest problems with the Raiders right now. Who makes the final decision? And how does nobody know that answer? If we go back to Saturday, Michael Silver had a story at The Athletic. And in that story, Michael Silver wrote, depending on what you read or whom you talk to, and trust me, there are plenty of people in the Raiders organization who aren't sure which calls are being made by whom, Brady is being traded by owner Mark Davis as the de facto boss when it comes to football matters. So the statement the Raiders put out says John Spytek's going to lead all football operations. But we've had reports that Mark Davis views Tom Brady as the boss of all of this, right? You also have, in that story from Mike Silver, wrote plenty of people who work under Spytek, Carroll, and Mark Davis don't know the answer to these questions. And those questions were, who wanted Pete Carroll? Who wanted Geno Smith? Who wanted Chip Kelly? Right? So Michael Silver wrote pretty clearly that people inside the organization don't know who is in charge. I've been asking that question for a year since Tom Brady came on board. Is Tom Brady the one running everything? Right? Because we don't know from the outside. It's not great, but it's fine if we don't know from the outside, if everybody on the inside does know, and for some reason they just want to keep that a secret. But it turns out not everybody on the inside knows who actually was in charge. And if you look back at last offseason, and this is important because they're going to need to nail a couple of offseasons in a row, but if you look back at last offseason, head coach decision was wrong, quarterback decision was wrong, offensive coordinator decision was wrong, first round pick was wrong. The rest of the draft, probably wrong. We didn't see enough of Jack Besh, Caleb Rogers, Charles Grant, Tonka Hemingway to truly say that, but probably wrong, because if they were good, I'm guessing they would have played a lot more. The free agent signings, to the lack thereof, were wrong. I think you could argue this last offseason, the Raiders didn't make any good moves. Any of them, right? I think all of them were probably the wrong move. And who was in charge of that? I think it's fair to look at, like, say, a Jamal Adams signing and point to Pete Carroll, right? That's a former Pete Carroll player. They brought him in late in the summer. That was a Pete Carroll move, right? Probably fair to say that Geno Smith was pushed by Pete Carroll, but why didn't Spytek or Brady stop it? It's because they didn't realize it was going to be this bad. That's the real answer. But who wanted Ashton Genty? Who decided to ignore the offensive line entirely in free agency, right? Who didn't get a better wide receiver, right? Like, there are lots of things that were probably not Pete Carroll, but we're not really sure. And was it Spytek or was it Brady? We don't know. And it's bad from an image standpoint, even worse when nobody in the building actually knows. One other detail from that Silver story: John Spytek is apparently the one who told Max Crosby that Crosby was going to be shut down for the last 2 games of the season. But Crosby doesn't know who actually made that decision. He doesn't know if Tom Brady's the one who actually said, hey, we need to shut down Crosby. So the best player on the team doesn't even get clarity on who's in charge. It's kind of wild. Now, on this whole who's in charge thing, John Spytek is leading football operations going forward. And John Spytek yesterday talked to the media. He's the one that did the press conference to talk about, hey, we fired Pete Carroll, we're moving forward, right? So he's in charge. But I want you to listen to, and if you're watching, also watch this. John Spytek got asked about Tom Brady multiple times yesterday, but this interaction, I think the body language and you can hear it too. The way Spytek starts his answer to this question is pretty telling on how questionable all of this is about who is actually in charge.
In moving forward, would you expect on a more regular basis to have Tom in the building physically?
I have a great relationship with Tom. We're in constant communication daily, and whether he's in the building or not, our conversations are very much similar. So I always love seeing him. He's one of somebody I've learned a lot from every time I've had a chance to sit in a room with him, but we've had a lot of great phone conversations as well.
So what you have is John Spytek. You can see it and you can hear it verbally and physically fidgeting before answering a question about, hey, is Tom Brady going to be in the building more often? And it's because John Spytek can't say if Tom Brady's going to be in the building more or less this season, because it appears as though nobody within the Raiders organization can tell Tom Brady when to show up. He just shows up whenever he wants, which is not very often because he's working for Fox and he's shooting Pizza Hut commercials. So Spytek gets asked this very direct question about, hey, is this guy going to be in the building more often? And he's got to think about it because it's an uncomfortable question for him to answer, probably because Tom Brady actually is the boss. And Spytek can't just say, yeah, we need his ass in the building more. If Spytek was in charge and Brady was going to be this beneficial, useful minority owner, you'd say, yeah, we need that guy in the building more if he's going to help out. But Spytek can't say that. It's Tom Brady. You don't want to say that. But also, you probably can't say it because Brady is the one that's actually in charge. At least that's what it gives off. When Brady wants to be in charge, he's the one that is actually in charge. All of it comes back to Mark Davis, right? Like, that's the end. Ultimately, it's about Mark Davis. He's bad at this. He's a bad owner, right? And we see it over and over. He doesn't go through good hiring practices. They have not done that as an organization in years. Doesn't make good hires and just isn't running a competent organization. And now, if Brady wasn't involved and the plan was Spytek is the general manager, he's in charge. Obviously, Spytek's got to be good at it, but I feel like that would be a good way to approach this. But with Brady, it's kind of like, all right, Spytek's in charge, and nobody really knows when Brady's in charge, right? If Brady wants a different quarterback than Spytek, does Brady get the quarterback? So I think there's problems there that just ultimately come from Mark Davis not being a good owner and honestly being starstruck. At the end of the day, it's just being starstruck. He wants the big names. He wants to be around Tom Brady. He wants to be associated with Tom Brady. And so if Brady wants to parachute in, be in the facility 5 days a year, wants to make 2 or 3 big decisions, Mark Davis is going to let that happen because he thinks it's cool for Tom Brady. So we'll see. Don't love the idea, but it might be a little bit better going forward because we've at least seen a month here of competent decision making. I do want to play one other thing from the SpyTech press conference yesterday, because he got asked about Max Crosby. They might trade Max Crosby. Crosby might ask for a trade. We'll see exactly what happens. It's one of the big questions, probably the second biggest outside of the first pick. I'd say it might be even bigger than the head coach. What do the Raiders do with Max Crosby? But he got asked about that yesterday, and here is what John Spytek had to say.
The offseason commences, obviously a lot of teams around the league will inquire about Max Crosby in a trade. Do you view him as a untradeable, untouchable player moving forward once the offseason starts?
I have a lot of respect for Max and how much he loves to play the game. And I've had the opportunity in the last several weeks to spend a lot of time with Max. And I think it's been well documented that he didn't love the idea of not playing football. And I think you always want that from your best players. In fact, I think that's why they're your best players. So I love Max. He embodies what a Raider is. I've been pretty upfront with that from the day that I sat up here almost a year ago, and I continue to believe that.
That is one of the best non-answers to a question you will ever hear. That is exactly whatever the media relations, the PR department with the Raiders, that was perfect for them. I don't think they could have coached him into a better answer than what he gave. He gets asked directly, is Max Crosby untouchable in a trade? And he doesn't even come close to answering that question. At no point in there does he acknowledge a trade or not trading Max Crosby. What he does instead, talks about how close he is with Crosby, compliments Crosby, brings up a related story about Crosby not being happy about getting benched for the last 2 games and put on IR that doesn't actually have any relevance to answering the question of, is he untradeable at this point? And ends that without really rambling. He doesn't go on for an extra 2 minutes talking about God knows what, where you just get lost there. A perfect non-answer, because the other key he didn't do there is like, there was no getting upset, no emotion, no declaration, nothing to really hang your hat on and say, oh, this is what he said about Max Crosby. He didn't give you anything. And you ask that question, and then he answers it that way. I don't even know if you realize right away that that was a non-answer because of how well he answered it without answering it. Perfect work by John Spytek. And because of that, they are absolutely looking into trading Max Crosby. No doubt about it. First off, if they were not interested in trading Crosby, he could have come out and said, we are not trading him. He's our franchise cornerstone. That is a non-starter for us. It's basically what Mark Davis said back in October. If you were not interested in trading Crosby, you would say that. You would absolutely say that. But if you were interested in trading Crosby, you could come out and say, we're not doing it. And then just say, we got an offer that was too good, and yeah, we traded him. But to come out and give a complete non-answer to that question, I think it means they're considering trading him, because he doesn't want to come out and say, we're not trading him, and then trade him 2 months later, right? I don't think he wants to do that. You also don't want to come out and say, yes, we're looking at trading Max Crosby. We're going to do what's best for the organization, because that probably pisses Max Crosby off. And then you got to deal with an Instagram story of him being mad at you, or you got to deal with him going on a podcast and saying how you don't respect him. So you don't want to say you're interested in trading him, even if you are. So based on his non-answer, I think the Raiders are absolutely going to explore trading Crosby. Now, you got to do it for the right price. You're not just going to move him for a second-round pick just because you want to move him, right? But if it's out there, I think they'll make that move, and they absolutely should. I've said this before, and don't worry, I'll say it again. They should be trying to trade Max Crosby, and I think Crosby should be looking for a trade as well. One last thing on John Spytek. I got to say, and I know I'm falling victim to win the press conference type of trap. You ever have a new head coach, and he comes in and gives this great, enthusiastic press conference, and everybody's like, wow, he is so much fun. I'm fired up for my team now. Raiders are going to do that with their next head coach, right? You're going to be pumped up after the press conference. It doesn't mean anything. Guys have great press conferences all the time and then go on to suck. all the time. So I'm falling into that trap a little bit, but it's not the first time we've heard Spytek talk. I kind of felt this way last year when he talked to the media as well. He feels competent. I mean, the way he answers questions and uncomfortable questions, he feels competent there. He's not stepping, what's the phrase I'm trying to think of there? He's not screwing things up, right? It feels like he's competent. And does that translate to drafting well or hiring a good coach? Not necessarily, but I don't know. I feel like there should be some competency there from John Spytek. One of the key things I think he said in his press conference yesterday was he very specifically said, we're not looking to win 10 games next year. He's like, it's great if we do, but that's not the goal of the organization. And thank God it shouldn't be. This team is not close. They are far away. They should be looking at like 2028 and saying, all right, can we win 10 games in 2028? Not next year. And he said that. And I think that's a real key for the Raiders, is understanding where they are. And I think they do. They got a little optimism that John Spytek could actually be that guy. One other thing, just because I looked this up yesterday and thought it was interesting. If you're looking at quarterbacks and head coach combinations and looking at the firing of Pete Carroll, the last 3 teams that drafted a quarterback first overall fired their head coach before they got a second year. So Caleb Williams with the Bears, it was Matt Eberflus, fired. Now Ben Johnson is there. Bryce Young with the Panthers, it was Frank Reich, fired. Now it's Dave Canales. Trevor Lawrence with the Jags, it was Urban Meyer. Yikes. Then Doug Peterson. They are now on to their third coach with Trevor Lawrence there. But all 3 of those scenarios, you had a quarterback taken first overall, and the head coach didn't even make it to the next year with that quarterback. And specifically, with the Panthers and the Bears, they could have fired that coach before that first season with their new quarterback, but they chose not to. They chose to give that coach one more chance. He wasn't taken first overall, but we just saw it with Jackson Dart as well. And but I should add the Titans to this list too. They did it as well. So the point here is that you should be trying to pair your head coach and your quarterback together. You should not be going into a season where we're going to fire this head coach if the team wins 5 games and pair him with a quarterback you took first overall. Because most likely, if you're drafting first overall, you're going to be bad the next year. Your team wasn't very good. So you're probably not going to be very good again, and you're going to end up firing that head coach. So I like the idea of pairing a quarterback and a head coach together and giving them 3 years of runway or whatever it is, and saying, here's your timeline. You guys are together. We'll evaluate along the way, right? If we're 0-17 and then we start the next year 0-9, you might not be making it, but you're going to get 3 legitimate years here, as long as it's not completely terrible, to show us that the 2 of you can be contenders. And after 3 years, if we don't make the playoffs and we're not anywhere close, we might be moving on from both of you and doing something else. The last one to go back to, where they didn't fire the coach after the first overall quarterback's first year, was Cincinnati, and it was Zach Taylor. Interestingly enough, like Pete Carroll, his first year was the year they were terrible and got the number 1 pick, but they kept Zach Taylor, who was an is an offensive mind. I don't know why I refer to him in the past tense, but is an offensive mind. They kept Zach Taylor, and that team, first year under Zach Taylor, no Joe Burrow, 2 wins. Second year under Taylor, first with Burrow, 4 wins. Third year, they went to the Super Bowl. That was a fairly quick turnaround there with Joe Burrow in place. They went to the playoffs the next year and then haven't been back since. Burrow's had some injuries that have hindered them quite a bit in the last couple of seasons, but that was the last one. And I know that he wasn't hired at the exact same time, but there's at least a level of, hey, you 2 are together. Let's see what you got. So I like the Raiders going with a new play caller, I should say head coach, should be the play caller, to pair up with Mendoza or Dante Moore, whatever they decide to do at quarterback. That's it for the first segment here. Coming up next, it is Bischoff's Briefs. We got 2 games tonight, Golden Knights and UNLV basketball play. Want to start Bischoff's Briefs by saying I do have my Patreon up and running. If you go to Patreon, search Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff. You can also go to patreon.com/CW/Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff. that is where my Patreon is. Plenty of you have asked for this. So if you find that out, there's a little intro video up there that'll explain some more. But I appreciate all of you that are interested in doing a Patreon with me, that want to give me some money. There will be some extra content there. That's going to be the poll, is you're going to get a little extra content from me. Hopefully some fun stuff. Should do some live shows in the future, some extra shows per month, per week. Could do some pregame or postgame stuff around some of the Golden Knights or Raiders or UNLV games this year, and some other fun stuff. So Patreon, go there, find Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff, and that is where you can help me out. You can support me via Patreon. Finally got that up and going. Now, the Golden Knights are back in action tonight. They are in Winnipeg. The Jets are in last place in the Western Conference, so that should help the Golden Knights. However, they're not exactly beating good or bad teams right now. They've lost 5 in a row. They have never lost 6 in a row. That has not happened in the franchise history. I love saying that because they're a little old now. We're getting close to a decade, but it's still not that long. But they have not lost 6 in a row ever in franchise history. So history is on the line tonight. 2 things. First one, I'm curious on the defensive pairings because it's bad with no Shea Theodore and no Braden McNabb. Obviously, that's your top pair. Nobody's going to have great defensive group when you lose your first and second defenseman. But last game we saw Hanifin and Hutton was the top pair. Lozon and Korzak was the second pair. And then Megna and Whitecloud was the third pair. Is Jacob Megna still in the lineup? Because he's not any good. Hutton and Hanifin is a top pair. I'm not even sure that's a good second pairing. Hanifin he hasn't been bad, but Hanifin just hasn't been like really anything special since the Golden Knights traded for him, right? He hasn't been terrible, but I think it has been a letdown is what it's been with Noah Hanifin. So that's just not a good group. Can they play well? Maybe. I don't know. It hasn't been great. But the other big thing here, the forward group, at least the top 6, has got to be better. I mean, the top 6 is a legitimate top 6 right now. Stone and Eichel, Marner and Hurdle, Barbashev, like they're there. That should be they should be good. And what I'm curious to know, how healthy is Jack Eichel? He misses 2.5 weeks, comes back. And after his first game back, Bruce Cassidy bluntly said in the postgame press conference, Eichel wasn't good, didn't play well. And then in his second game, they weren't good either. And so through 2 games, so very small sample size here, but Eichel's been on the ice for 4 goals against, 1 goal for, but 1-4 is a terrible ratio for what should be your best player. And if you look at the advanced numbers at 5-on-5, the expected goal with Eichel on the ice is 35%. That's horrendous. The Corsi's 36%. When he's on the ice, the Golden Knights are getting dominated, right? And there hasn't, how many Eichel plays have there been at 5-on-5 where you're like, oh yeah, there's Jack Eichel. He usually does it every game. Has it happened in the 2 games since he's been back? Genuine question, is he healthy? Because he might not be. The way he's played through 2 games, it doesn't look like the Jack Eichel that you're used to having. I said before he came back, like, oh, they're going to be better just because it's Jack Eichel. He's your best player back in the lineup. But if it's Jack Eichel coming back and he's not close to 100%, maybe you're not better with him in the lineup because he's just not the same Jack Eichel. Also tonight, UNLV basketball takes on Wyoming. First road game for the Runnin' Rebels since December 7th. They've won all of their road games. They won at Memphis and they won at Stanford. It's only 2, but they're perfect on the road so far. Ken Pom says an 82-76 win for Wyoming. Wyoming projects to win this one. Interesting on Wyoming. They've played nobody. Their strength of schedule is 313th. The only top 100 team they played in the non-conference was Texas Tech. They lost the game only by 4. But what's fascinating is like UNLV's not good. They're not good. I think they're 130 in Ken Pom right now. Wyoming has not beaten a team ranked higher than that on the season. They've got 10 wins, but none of them were against teams as good as UNLV. So what does that mean? I don't exactly know, because Wyoming is still off to a better start than UNLV. They're still higher in efficiency metrics like Ken Pom. So we'll see. But a couple of fun stats for you. One that could be a key to UNLV win. Wyoming sends people to the free throw line at an absurd rate. There's a stat called free throw rate, which is basically the percentage of your possessions that end as free throws, right? Wyoming ranks 360th on defense in that stat, over 50%. UNLV offensively is 24th best at that in the country. So I would expect UNLV to shoot a ton of free throws in this game. However, UNLV is 308th in free throw percentage this year. So I don't know if they'll make very many, but they'll go to the free throw line a lot. That is mainly because of their front court. Tyron Jones is shooting the most free throws per game on the team, and he's shooting 46% from the free throw line. Jacob Benarby's better, 63%, but not good, and he shoots a decent amount of free throws. And then Emmanuel Steffen has only taken 9 on the year, but he's 4 for 9. He was also 0 for 3 last year at Arizona, so small sample size, but he might be really bad at this too. The front court's just bad at free throws. The rest of the team's fine, right? The rest, I think everybody else except Isaac Williamson is over 70%, and he's at like 68%. So the rest of the team's fine. It's really just the front court that can't make free throws. I'm actually feeling optimistic. Wyoming is not a great three-point shooting team, so UNLV shouldn't get crushed by giving up 23s while they only make 3, right? And UNLV going to the free throw line a lot, get guys in foul trouble. Like, I think UNLV wins this one. I think they start Mountain West play 3-0, and we're looking at saying they haven't really beaten a good team, but that's 3 wins, and they're not that good either, so 3 is a good place to start. I think they go on the road, and I think they beat Wyoming. Also, UNLV news, but on the football side, didn't get to this on Monday, but Mike Scheer is back at UNLV. He was the defensive coordinator for 2 seasons under Barry Odom when UNLV, had the 2 best defensive years the program's ever had. He went with Barry Odom to Purdue, but is no longer there. He reportedly left his job at Purdue voluntarily. That was the reporting in December as to why he was no longer at Purdue. I hear he was promised a $100,000 raise, but Barry Odom eventually said, "I've never heard of such a thing." And so he just left the program, and now he's back at UNLV. Interestingly, though, he's the linebackers coach. He's not back as the defensive coordinator. Guys don't usually voluntarily leave a power conference coordinator position to end up as a group of 5 position coach. Doesn't happen very often. But I do find it funny that, do we call Mike Scheer the most successful defensive coordinator at UNLV? I don't know. Odom was kind of in charge of the defense, so maybe not, but we'll call him that for now. The most successful defensive coordinator UNLV's had is a position coach under Paul Gunther, who just had a defense that got shredded most of the season. So I love that, and you can guarantee that as soon as UNLV has a bad defensive game, people are going to be calling for Gunther to be fired and for Mike Scheer to take over as the defensive coordinator. Also in the NFL, there are a few more job openings. Falcons fired Raheem Morris. Browns fired Kevin Stefanski. I actually think Stefanski could be a real candidate for the Raiders. I think he fits in that offensive play caller. The Browns weren't good, but the Browns are never good. They were better record-wise under Stefanski than pretty much every other coach they've had for a very, very long time. It's a mess of an organization. It's a mess of a quarterback situation there. So I don't know how much you look at that and blame Stefanski. So Browns have an opening, but also might have fired the best coach that's going to be available. We'll see what people think of Stefanski. Is anybody in the playoffs going to get fired? I think what Jay Glazer said something about LaFleur getting fired in Green Bay or that being a possibility. None of the other ones really make sense, right? You can't imagine any of the other teams firing their coaches. So I think maybe there's another day or two where a coach gets fired, but after this week, I don't think we're going to have any other openings. I think we're going to be kind of set here. And last thing, just because I want to talk about it, Trinidad Chambliss might return to Ole Miss. So the quarterback at Ole Miss is looking to get an extra year of eligibility. He had a season when he was at Division II where he played in 2 games, but only 2 games because he was sick for the entire year. And at the time, I guess that wasn't eligible for a medical red shirt, but under the new rules, it would be. So he's asking for a retroactive medical red shirt. And if he gets it, he's already committed to play back at Ole Miss. He was potentially going to hit the transfer portal, was potentially going to follow Lane Kiffin to LSU, but that's not going to happen. He's either going to play at Ole Miss next year or be out of college eligibility. If he doesn't get it, I'm very fascinated what his NFL prospects are. He's not projected to be a first-round pick. He's only 6 feet tall. He didn't even start this entire year because he was the backup at the start of the year to Austin Simmons at Ole Miss. But he feels like the type of quarterback that makes that big move up draft boards between now and April if he is, in fact, in the draft. So I love the guy just because I went to Ole Miss, and he's got them in the semifinals and just played one unbelievable game against Georgia. But what does he actually mean if he ends up in the NFL draft? I don't know, but would be a fascinating quarterback to actually pick. That is it for Bischoff's Briefs. Coming up next, Jason Fitz is going to join the show from Yahoo Sports. He is Jason Fitz from Yahoo Sports. All right, Jason, where are you on the radio? I heard you this weekend on the radio talking about quarterbacks being important for jobs, but where are you at all times on the radio?
Usually Saturdays on Fox Sports Radio, but during the holidays, they had me and Buck Rising, my radio partner on Fox. They had us kind of all over the place. So we were all over the lineup. But usually Saturdays, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, we're on radio. And then Monday through Friday, Yahoo Sports Daily, 9 to 11 p.m. or 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern on YouTube and all the free TV channels and all those places. We do a great morning show every single day. Great. I'm biased, but great.
Jason was wonderful enough to come on my show on ESPN Las Vegas. I know you were doing it before I even started doing the show. And now you're nice enough to come on this show with me while I'm just trying to do stuff on my own. So thank you. I think you were one of our best guests at all times, and I'm happy to still talk to you.
Dude, I was excited you asked me to do this. I'm excited for you, and I think, realistically, the crazy thing about modern radio and modern podcasting is that we're all just looking for sort of people that are talking about the things that we love about. So I'm glad that you're finding a platform to do that, because frankly, there's an audience that wants to hear about what you have to say. So I think this is awesome. I'm excited for you. And plus also I started as a pod. So I've always I have an affinity. I think it's the single greatest medium in all of media that you can go out and find now tailored. Hey, I'm into this team or this area or this city. This show will fill my needs. I think it's one of the most powerful things in media now.
All right. I want to start on the Raiders and asking you, with Pete Carroll getting fired, what was your biggest disappointment in Pete Carroll? Like, if you look back at sort of maybe what you expected when they did hire him and then what actually happened, like, what was your biggest disappointment in Pete Carroll over the last year?
I thought that Pete would be a calming, stabilizing, hey, I've been here, I know how organizations run. I thought it would really change that. Stability is what I thought it would bring. So I think the biggest disappointment is that we got even less stability, and you could see it throughout the course of the season. Coordinators being fired, immediately rumors just circulating about who wanted what coordinator and who didn't. Save yourself sort of opportunities that you rarely see from, I think, people as respected as Pete Carroll. So I think the most discouraging thing is that it went so wrong with somebody that certainly had the resume to fix it, and it's just a reminder that, there's no one person that can fix what ails this franchise.
Is that because of the Raiders? Like, I thought the same thing with Pete Carroll. I thought that, and that's why Mark Davis hired him, was they were going to have some competency. And my biggest criticism was that it wasn't going to lead to the first overall pick, but it ended up doing that. Is there something fundamentally wrong with the Raiders that, I don't want to say it's unfixable, but like, Pete Carroll gets dragged down by it, and most people are going to get dragged down by it?
Yeah, I think looking back, hindsight's 2020. Go all the way back to the introductory press conference for Pete Carroll when he was asked, all right, you and John Spytek working together for the first time, which already is a red flag. You don't really know each other, already a red flag. Who's going to make the decisions when you guys don't agree? And we never got a straight answer from anybody. And I look back at that as such a key moment and an example of how things are broken. Because here's the thing, and maybe hopefully this will not be the case next time. But I'm a big believer that there's a very simple plan on how to fix a broken franchise. And that plan is from accountability top down. So I want a owner to pick a team president. The team president picks the GM picks the coach, and they all answer to that next person in the hierarchy. So when you look at the teams that are constantly bad, look at the Titans as another example. Like, they fire a coach, then they fire a GM, then they fire the coach, then they fire the GM. Like, this never-ending cycle of no one person is truly accountable. The Falcons have already blown this. Before they've hired anybody, the fact that the Falcons have a search committee helping them with the head coaching position, but a separate committee helping them with the GM position, and then they're going to bring bring in a third entity to be the new team. Like, all of this is just so stupid. You have to have top-down accountability, and I do think you have to have in every franchise a face. Like, if you look across the board, who is the face from an organizational standpoint? Who's the face of the Kansas City Chiefs? It's Andy Reid, right? Like, who's the face of the Philadelphia Eagles? It's Howie Roseman. So, like, whenever things go right or go wrong, you know who's getting the credit and the blame from great organizations when they are at their peak. When the Patriots were the best of the Patriots, it was Belichick's organization, right? So now it's Vrabel's organization. I think you need that one person. So looking back, it was wildly concerning to me even then that, I thought Pete Carroll was going to fix things. But to do that, Pete would have to have the autonomy to be Pete Carroll. I think this whole thing was broken from the outset. So now maybe if Spytek truly is picking the next head coach, and I do love in his press conference that he said the coach will pick the assistant coaches. All right, now we're getting somewhere. Like, I think you have to have some structure as to how decisions are made, because that gives you a structure for accountability.
Okay, so that part of it is fascinating given where the Raiders are and what role Tom Brady actually has, because Spytek in his press conference said, like, the accountability is with me. I'm the most accountable for what happened this season. And he also talked about the assistant coaches and how that's going to be the new coach's thing. But he also got asked, like, hey, is Tom Brady going to be around more? And he kind of fidgeted and had to think for a couple of seconds before he answered that question. And it's like, I've been very critical of the Tom Brady role, mainly because we don't really know what it is. I think it was Michael Silver had a story over the weekend that was like there were people in the building that didn't know how in charge Brady was. Was he the one that said Max Crosby should be shut down? Like, I guess, how does Brady fit in? Because in theory, Spytek's the GM, and the way he phrased it is he talks to Tom Brady and keeps him up to date on all the big decisions and seeks his input, which seems fine. But is that actually how it's happening? Or is Tom Brady going to come in here and say, I want this coach and I want this quarterback at number 1 overall, and it doesn't matter what Spytek thinks because Brady wants those at the highest level decisions? That I think is sort of the weird part that we don't know, and it sounds like people in the organization don't always know what his role is.
Well, and that's why, at some point, Tom has to understand, I believe, that this sort of lack of clarity is actually damaging everything. And that's the part of it that I don't think necessarily has set in, because to your point, people inside the halls need to know where accountability lies. Like, I asked Jason McCourty, he was on with me on Yahoo, and I asked him, because he played for a terrible team and then he played for the Patriots. And I asked him what the biggest difference is between a winning organization and a non-winning organization. And his answer blew me away. He said, everybody being on the same page. And he even pointed to, he said, oftentimes when you're on a bad team, you'll be sitting in your positional meetings and your positional coach will say, I know the defensive coordinator wants to run this. It's stupid. We're going to do it this way. And he used that as a real example. All right, think about that now. Extrapolate that to what we've all seen with the Raiders, right? Like, so if you don't have true understanding of accountability the entire way, what you're really doing is sending the message to everybody, kind of do what you want, because we don't know who's holding who accountable to what. If that's the case, that's where it gets really dangerous. And I think what Tom doesn't understand is that by being a broadcaster that's also an owner that, for whatever reason, is being propped up like he's a majority owner, even though he owns a small percentage, while also being treated like he's the team president, even though he isn't. Like, when you have all of this confusion to everybody on the outside looking in, it actually does a ton of damage to me on the inside, because you simply don't have structure in place for everybody to even believe. Like, if the room doesn't believe that Spytek really has the power to do anything, you've emasculated the man before he's even had the chance to make a decision. And that's a problem in a locker room. I mean, if Spytek comes in and says, this is what it's going to be, and the whole room says, yeah, as long as Tom allows that, is that the message you really want? So I think it's a massive problem. And then that massive problem trickles up to Mark Davis, because whatever happens under his watch, he's allowing. You're either coaching it or allowing it. So Mark Davis is allowing all of this ambiguity to soak in and sort of be a negative sort of cloud over the Raiders organization.
I'll say this about John Spytek, because he hasn't talked a lot publicly, but I feel like every time I've seen a press conference of his, I feel like he brings competency and could be a good general manager. Like, I've felt that last year when he talked, and then when he talked earlier this week after they fired Pete Carroll, that wow, this guy seems like he knows what he's talking about. He does a good job avoiding questions he doesn't want to answer while still answering them. But it's just goes back to, is Tom Brady the one that's actually in control, and where does that power lie in the organization? I guess I'd say this. You are a Raiders fan. Do you think Tom Brady's influence or just partial ownership ends up being a positive or a negative? Like 5 years from now, is it like, wow, Tom Brady, he did help the Raiders? Or is it still these kind of conversations where it's like, oh, he's still on Fox and he's in Pizza Hut commercials and like he shows up 5 times a year and we don't really know what his role is?
Yeah, it's more likely a negative. I mean, and that's also, look across the landscape. Like Michael Jordan was a terrible team owner. John Elway found Peyton Manning. Okay, are you supposed to get credit for that? What else? Like, did John Elway go out and find a quarterback in the draft? I mean, the number of times we've seen great players struggle to figure out how to run a front office. That's why, again, I'll go back to the reports that Matt Ryan is going to be the team president for the Atlanta Falcons. What proof of concept do we have that Matt Ryan has any idea how to run this thing? Now, the counter argument to that is John Lynch certainly stepped right into a GM role in San Francisco and has done a very good job. So maybe it can work. But the problem is this feels very reminiscent of James Dolan and the New York Knicks when he hired Phil Jackson, right? So James Dolan got so tired of being blamed for the problem of the Knicks all the time that he eventually just spent a bunch of money on the biggest legend he could possibly bring in. And he said, hey, I know what I don't know, so I'm bringing in Phil Jackson because he knows everything about basketball. And then later you find out that, he brought in Phil, but Phil was kind of checked out, and Phil didn't really seem to want to do the job. And by the way, there were also a lot of cooks in the kitchen behind the scenes that was making it difficult for Phil, so we sort of checked out. Am I not describing everything we're talking about with Tom Brady? Like, he's sort of into it. He's sort of not into it. He's an owner, but not enough of an owner. Mark Davis can turn around and say, I don't know what you guys want me to do. I hired every single cycle except for Antonio Pierce. Mark Davis has hired a huge name. Like, he just has. Like, it wasn't I'm going to go get the best coach. It was, I'm going to go get John Gruden because, man, my dad couldn't do that. Think of the splashy headlines. And then Josh McDaniels was one of the most, if not the most coveted name of his cycle. And then all of a sudden, no, we're going to go get him. Then, you go through Antonio Pierce. That doesn't work out. What do? You go get Pete Carroll. Like, at some point, I feel like Mark Davis is playing a video game, and he just turns around and says, well, that's a big name everybody's going to know, and he's got a good resume, so it'll work. And then he's combining that with Tom Brady, all to sort of build a wall of responsibility in front of him where he says, I don't know what you want me to do. So I think the problem here is that Brady was in the building last year when Pete Carroll became the head coach. So if your answer is Brady's going to fix everything, first you got to explain how Brady blew it the first year he was there, because this entire organization blew it in this first year.
All right. They have the number 1 pick and the season's over. So there's some optimism here. And I actually am excited to see what they do with the number 1 pick and to talk about a potential franchise quarterback. But I want to start here. Are you, as a Raiders fan, all in on quarterback at number 1? Because I know when we've talked to you in the past, you've brought up drafting quarterbacks in the first round. A lot of them are bad. It doesn't always fix your franchise. But that was when they were picking 6 or 12 or whatever. Now they're at 1. Are you all in on quarterback, or are you sitting here thinking, well, maybe they should trade back?
No, I think look, you're right. Everything you just said that I've said is true. And I'm working on a long-form piece that I hope to have done in the next month, because it's going to take, I've got a lot of people helping me with stats and info research that will show you when you are the first pick in the draft, you're screwed. Like that. I mean, just the honest answer to this is that, in fact, I've already looked back. I can tell you this. I've looked at every starting quarterback drafted first overall. I looked at their record as a rookie since 2000. Only one quarterback selected first overall has had a winning record as a starter his first year. That was Andrew Luck, who we remember was drafted to a Colts team that was never supposed to be that bad. Peyton got hurt. That's what gave them the first overall pick in the draft. Andrew Luck went 11-5. Nobody else has sniffed the opportunity to have a winning record. So one thing that I love about Spytek is he made it clear today that they're not going to be in contention for the next couple of years. Like, he repeatedly said, like, look, we're not, if we can win 10 games, great, but we need somebody in here that understands this is a long rebuild. I think that's the right mentality. With that being said, at some point, when you are picking first overall and you can cherry pick, if there was clearly some dominant player here that was just otherworldly, that we're saying, oh my God, this is once in a generation, maybe you could talk me out of it. But I don't think there is. B, you've got your choice. You can go, like, there's a difference between we're picking 6th and we're going to get the 3rd best quarterback. Like right now, this year, the Arizona Cardinals are feeling the pain that the Raiders have felt for years. They have the 5th pick in the draft, which is not going to put them high enough. If Dante Moore comes out, there's probably only going to be 2 quarterbacks with a first-round grade across the board. I don't think Ty Simpson is coming out either. There's a chance there's only 1. So the Jets, even with the 2nd pick, would it be smart for the Jets to take a quarterback? Well, not if it's Garrett Nussmeier, right? Like it wouldn't have made sense for the Raiders to trade up. In my mind, I never thought, and we talked about this when you were doing your show, and I was on air with you guys. I always thought trading up for Michael Penix Jr. was asinine. And now we sit here a couple years in, and everybody said, well, you lost out on Michael Penix Jr. But now we're not even sure Michael Penix Jr. was really a loseout, right? Like, so it's alarming how hard it is to get it right at the quarterback position. But when you have the 1st overall pick and you need a quarterback, yeah, I happen to believe that Fernando and Dante are both better prospects than Cam Ward was last year. I think that Fernando and Dante are the sort of person that you take the chance and you try and make it happen. But to that point, I will caution everybody, Cam Ward hasn't saved anything for the Titans. So, it's not simple.
How good do you think Fernando Mendoza is? Because I feel like we've had back-to-back years of weak quarterback classes. I don't feel like Fernando Mendoza is like this, oh, yes, that's the number 1 pick. Like, it doesn't feel like this great quarterback class, even though you're probably going to take one at number 1.
I think it depends on what we define as, like, because to me, I sat down on my couch for the Big Ten championship game, and I immediately said out loud to my dogs, all right, show me what you got. And on that first drive, Fernando Mendoza was absolutely knocked out, right? Knocked cold. Came back in and played lights out against one of the best college football defenses we've seen in years. And then what did he do in his first playoff game? Came out and just absolutely tore him up. The RPO portions of that offense make it a tough evaluation. I agree with that. I think he's really accurate. I think he's really good at standing in the pocket and delivering the football. He is not as athletic as Dante Moore. I don't think that's a hot take. He's not going to be Mahomes that runs out and makes these weird arm angle throws, but I do think that he has every opportunity to stand up. And like I've seen the Matt Ryan comps. By the way, if you end up with Matt Ryan, you're ending up with an NFL MVP. Like I don't think I love how we turn that into like some massive negative. I think Fernando Mendoza has a chance to be a really good quarterback in the NFL for a decade. So I'm comfortable with that. Dante, to me, is much more just because people say project. I don't think project is the right word for Dante. I think the right thing for Dante is, man, it's just limited game film. So you're talking about somebody that hasn't played a lot of football, but he's way more athletic than Fernando Mendoza particularly. But, I think either of those guys, as long as you have the right plan, and the right plan for me, for Dante would be, do I have a vet Dante can sit under and learn while he gets more time on task? I just think that that's important. And even with Fernando, I don't know that I want to rush him in to a starting situation. Like if it works, great. But yes, I would be comfortable with, I'm more comfortable with either of those two than I would have been with Cam Ward. I think either of those two also would have ranked below Drake May in the last draft. So like it's somewhere in between to me.
Okay, on the next coach, because I think the best path a team should take, especially if you're taking a quarterback number 1, is to absolutely go offensive-minded head coach and try to find your great play caller. Is that where you sit right now? Would you rather see them go, hey, hire a good offensive coordinator and let him handle the quarterback and figure out the defense with the head coach? Like, do you have a preference on what type of head coach they hire?
I absolutely want one of two things. I want an offensive guy or I want a defensive guy that's simply unfireable. But I think one thing about the offensive guy and that I think we got to remind everybody is the Eagles go to the Super Bowl when their coordinators are good and they don't when they don't. The Lions were a Super Bowl caliber team until they lost their coordinators. If you believe that Fernando Mendoza can be a star quarterback, for example, then whatever offensive coordinator comes in is going to be working with a number 1 overall pick at the quarterback position, a number 6 overall pick, Ashton Genty, that I think can be a very special running back, and arguably the best tight end in the league in Brock Bowers. Like, you're going to have some success, you would think, with that offense if things go well, which means your quarterback's going to be learning a new offense every year because your offense coordinator is constantly bouncing. I personally don't love that. So I want an offensive-minded head coach that really is in charge of the system, but I would love if he gave play calling to somebody else. So let him execute it, let somebody else play call it. and then you bring in the best defensive coordinator that you possibly can. I think that's the better way long term, because what I don't want is a defense. Flores, I've seen all the Flores to Daboll stuff, and like, hey, Flores is the coach and Daboll is the offensive coordinator. Okay. And when that offense absolutely fires on all cylinders, Daboll is going to get another job somewhere. And now suddenly we're going to be judging Flores by how deep is his phone book to call other offensive coordinators. I don't love that. So frankly, I would take the offensive guy if I had the choice.
All right. I want to shift gears for just a second. In the college football playoff, who's winning the national championship? Is it too easy to say Indiana?
No, I think Indiana's win. They are the best team. My God. And not only are they the best team, they have a win at Oregon. They have a win in the Big Ten championship game over Ohio State, obviously. And now they have a playoff win over Bama. Like, tell me who has a better resume. Like, not only I know that they play a lot of fluff in the Big Ten. Everybody does now in modern college football. But my God, yeah. Like, I mean, that defense flies with team speed that is incredible. They got a couple of guys that are going to play on Sundays at wide receiver, and they have the Heisman Trophy winner who happens to be just a wildly dialed-in super nerd that loves football. Like, I don't see the temptation of just like partying your way through a national championship. I don't see that as a threat to this team. I don't see distractions as a threat to this team. And they happen to be, I think, the best team. This Oregon game is going to be the national championship. Whatever happens in, Ole Miss and Miami, that's cute. It's great. They're going to go to the championship game. They'll get beat by whoever from this Indiana-Oregon game, but I like Indiana.
We should be cheering for Oregon Ole Miss to play each other, though, right?
Just because we don't want Fernando Mendoza to play even more, or just because we want Ole Miss in the national championship game for the trolling?
Well, because I went to Ole Miss would be one of them.
Yeah, that's fine.
But the other one, I mean, the most fun game we've seen in the college football playoff was Trinidad Chambliss running around throwing the ball against Georgia's defense. I'm signing up to watch that no matter what team it's against.
Yeah, I mean, Trinidad Chambliss has made himself some Sunday money over the course of the playoffs. Like, it's an astounding win if he ends up, like, I know that there were reports yesterday he's committed to a new contract at Ole Miss. That's a huge win. If they're able to keep Trinidad Chambliss, even with Lane Kiffin going somewhere else, that is a massive, massive win for Ole Miss football. There's no doubt about it. And you're right. Yeah, give me explosiveness after explosiveness. But frankly, I still think Indiana Ole Miss could be as good of a game as Oregon Ole Miss, I think.
Okay. Also wanted to ask you this. I don't know if you saw this over the weekend, but there was a report from Ian Rappaport about the candidates the Giants were interested in, and Antonio Pierce was one of them. Would you advise another NFL team to hire Antonio Pierce?
No. Zero chance. Some of the things that I've heard from behind the scenes, I don't think that there's any chance anybody's hiring Antonio Pierce as the next head coach of their football team. I will say this. He's going to win in the interview. Coaches, owners, everybody loves his big brazen personality. Like, I get that. He's going to win in the interviews. But no, I mean, I think this is the epitome of what's wrong with the Rooney Rule. Like, there's a certain group of guys that are just easy to interview because it checks off the Rooney Rule box, and then you can hire who you're serious about. I think, AP is an easy interview for the Giants because of his history there. Hell, they might even find a spot on staff for him somewhere if he wants it, and then Stefanski ends up with that job and gets a chance to work with a quarterback. I think that's much more likely to happen.
All right, last thing to ask you, and if people listen to you coming on the press box on ESPN Las Vegas, they'll either love or hate this, but 2026, is there anything you're most looking forward to in music?
No, I don't. Like, that's actually a great question. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't have an answer to that, but I will say this. Touring has gotten so incredible. Like, it's gotten so big. Shows have gotten so big. Stadium tours have gotten so big. I spent more of my time going to concerts in 2025 than I feel like I have in 10 years. So it's funny because just a few years ago, COVID felt like it had ripped apart the entire music business, and now everybody's back out, and the money's absolutely astronomical. So, the fact that Post Malone and Jelly Roll are rolling it back for a whole nother season of stadiums just speaks to the fact that, man, I don't know, summers feel like they've become concert destination again, and that makes my heart happy for the business as a whole. I do hope that Miley Cyrus, this is like a big anniversary year for Miley with Hannah Montana. Miley doesn't tour. This is what I'll put into the ethos in a city that you know well. I think Miley Cyrus should play at the Sphere. Like, that is the one thing. Like, she can't tour because it's too much on her voice, and she doesn't love the rigmarole of having to go to different cities. She's a very visual artist. Put her at the Sphere. Like, now that we've seen the massive success of the Backstreet Boys at the Sphere, I think the only way you could play the Sphere and do it right is if you do it with a massive pop act. So give me Lady Gaga or Miley Cyrus at the Sphere. I would be in for that.
See, this is why I love talking to you, because nowhere else am I going to get a suggestion of Miley Cyrus doing a Hannah Montana anniversary tour or concert anywhere else. You're the only one bringing that. I hope you know.
Yeah, well, and also she does have multiple of the most downloaded songs in music history at this point. Like it's amazing to think that Party of the USA was an anthem for that generation, Wrecking Ball was an anthem for that generation, and then Flowers has been its new anthem for a new generation. Fun fact, we were playing the iHeart show in Vegas, the iHeart radio show years ago with a band, and it was the first time Miley had ever sung Wrecking Ball on stage. And so it was crazy because it was the outdoor show in the afternoon before the arena show at night. And here she was running around on stage, and she had a bunch of little people on stage with her for the dynamic portion of the show, and they all just sort of went to the wings of the stage and just stood there and watched while she vulnerably crushed Wrecking Ball for the first time in front of people. And I just looked at it and I thought, only Miley could just, and then the party went right back to weird.
Okay, I do want to ask you, touring is back. Like, my wife and I love metal music. We grew up but when we first started dating, we were going to concerts together. That was one of the big things that we first started bonding over. When you say that, we went to like 6 concerts from the end of the summer through the fall, and I didn't put it together, but that's probably more than we went to from 2020 into 2025 combined.
Yeah, I mean, so you have a couple of things. Like, again, everybody lost their income during COVID, so they're trying to get it back. But B, the other, and this is a huge part of it, streaming just doesn't make any money for anybody, right? So the label makes money on everything because they're the label. But streaming makes so little that you really do have to tour more, especially like for you as a metalhead. Like, most of those bands don't have great revenue streams outside of how much can we tour. So, that's one of the advantages too. And you see more and more across the country, different sized rooms popping up everywhere, right? So it used to be that you were only touring in like 8,000 seat places or 20,000 seat places. Now there are 3,000, 4,000 seat theaters that have popped up all over. It makes touring so attainable for different, whether you're a club act or whether you're a stadium act. You have so much opportunity in sizing now that I think you can reach your audience better than ever too. So it's kind of crazy that the infrastructure for touring is improved so much post COVID that I think for the next 10 years, we're set. If you love a band, the best thing about it is you're going to get to see them a lot live. You have to. It's the only way they make any damn money.
We saw Bring Me the Horizon played, and we went to LA because they were at the Clippers Arena to see them there. So we saw one that was an arena tour. Spirit Box played at the Pearl at the Palms, which is one of those, like, I'm going to guess 4,000, 5,000 is how big that is. And then we also saw Silverstein, who played at the House of Blues on the Strip, which is there's an upper deck, but I mean that can't be more than 1,000, 2,000 people max, maybe.
Yeah.
That feels high there too.
I've played that House of Blues on the Strip in Mandalay a few times, and that place is wild. That is just like, you just gear up for what is going to be a party. Like, everything about it feels like a party. Very little of that show is actually like that room, for whatever reason, and that backstage area just creates wild chaos.
Oh, I wanted to tell you this because we saw another concert, and I'm just curious your thoughts on this. There's a band from Australia called Wind Waker that's not very popular at all. And they were touring in the U.S. With a bigger band from Australia called Northlane. My wife and I have never heard of Northlane, but they were the headliner on this tour. We love Wind Waker. Like, we both think it's like one of the better new metal bands and all that. They were playing first at the House of Blues as well. We showed up right after doors opened, were one of like 25 people in there for them. They played their 4 or 5 songs, and we left after that. We just watched the opener.
Hell yeah. I love that. Look, one of the weird things, and it was even weird for us when we were touring and first doing OK touring. We'd be on these huge tours, and like Brad Paisley and Rascal Flatts and all these huge country tours. But then the crazy thing is that, like, Paisley and Flats and all of them at their peak, they were only playing shows on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So we would do the opening set, for any of those tours, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, where you're playing like maybe, depending on the show and depending on the length, sometimes 25, sometimes 35 minutes, right? but you're also not really making any money on that. And then, Brad and his whole band and crew, they all take the buses and go home. We need to make money. So then we turn around Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, when everybody else was going home and resting, we were playing club shows, like in all the random country music clubs where we were doing 90-minute sets, because that's how you actually make cash. So it's funny, we would meet back up with a major tour every time. And it was crazy that, they're all rested and they're like, oh man, had a great week at home. And we're like, we've done 250 shows this year. Like, it was wild chaos. But to that point, when we first started playing, like when If I Die Young first came out, there were like 10 people. We were playing amphitheaters, and there were like 10 people in there for us. Like, that's it. Nobody had heard the song. Nobody knew anything about the band. By the end of that year, when that song had blown up, all of a sudden we're walking out on stage. And like, I remember we did one tour that was Scotty McCreery right after he'd won American Idol was the first opener. And then us, and If I Die Young had just gone huge. And then it was Brad was playing last. And I remember our first show that year was in, I think, Grand Rapids, Michigan, and of the year. And I remember walking out as they'd opened doors, and it was like 2 hours before our set. I walked out, every seat was full. People were there for the openers, which is so rare. But then the crazy thing is that, like, once Brad started his set, you could see people started to leave. And that was where we're like, hey, we're doing pretty good. Like, they're actually showing up for us. So yeah, I totally respect. Stay for the portion of the concert you want and leave for the portion of the concert you don't.
Last thing I want to ask you. How in the world do singers keep their voice for tours? Because I talk for a living. I've been doing this for over a decade, but it's just me talking. When I go to a concert and I'm just there and I'm singing along, the next day I'm like, there's no way I could do that again in 24 hours. I don't understand how they do that 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 times a week for 2 months, 3 months.
It's a first for some people. Like, I was always lucky. It's a genetic gift. Like, because I sang a lot with the band stuff, and it was funny that you could sing, scream, do all of that stuff, and by the end of the year, I was fine. I needed like a day off for my voice to recoup, and it's fine. And I was like, my greatest comparison to this is like, certainly he sounds terrible now, but all those years Axl Rose didn't take care of his voice versus Barbra Streisand walking around with like the scarf on and like, I'm on vocal rest day, right? Like, you either have that gene or you don't. But I also think that the muscles in your throat, like your vocal cords, they sort of build up over time. So if you're doing it the right way, it's amazing what your voice can go through, for sure. So and it is funny, like you say, just doing radio. When I first got to ESPN and I was doing 5 hours of radio a day plus doing SportsCenter at Snapchat at night, I went to an ear, nose, and throat doctor because I was like, man, I've never struggled with my voice. I was losing my voice. I was doing 7 hours of content a day, but I was losing my voice. And he did the whole like scope down my throat and everything. He's like, man, if you didn't tell me, your vocal cords are in perfect shape. I just think, sometimes you're just lucky. And I don't know if it's lucky or if it's a genetic predisposition or the way the muscle develops. But yeah, you either got it or you don't. And for the people that don't and can't manage it, it's brutal. What, like, you wake up one day and you realize that, oh my God, I have to do show after show after show. That's why I said, like, Miley, I've always respected. She's flat out come out and said part of the reason she doesn't tour is because she loves to record every song in the toughest key possible because it sounds more dramatic. Now, how the hell do you reproduce that when you've got, you could do one in a karaoke spot, but if you go to a karaoke spot and they're like, all right, for the next 90 minutes, sing all of these Miley songs, you're like, I cannot. It's vocal actor. I cannot do it. So, I think it's just a gift for some people.
Well, he is Jason Fitz from Yahoo Sports. Jason, it's always great to talk to you. If I decide to start a music podcast, you're going to be the first person I reach out to for that as well.
I would be mad if I wasn't. Let's go. We'll just talk about the minutia of the music business all day.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
Thank you, brother.
So a big thank you to Jason Fitz for coming on the show. Again, I have my Patreon up. It's patreon.com/CW/technicallycorrect with Tyler Bischoff. You can just search Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff in Patreon if you want to find it. If you want to support me, that's probably going to be the best way to do it. I should say on here, if you go to sign up there, do it through Patreon, the website, not through the app on your iPhone, because apparently if you do it through the app through iPhone, it takes extra money away. Some of that money goes to Apple instead of to me and or Patreon. So sign up through Patreon's website to maximize my value in this scenario. But go to Patreon, sign up. We're going to have some new content, some extra content there for you if you do so. Again, I appreciate all of you that would even consider signing up for a Patreon, or those of you that have told me to sign up for a Patreon. It means a lot to me. But We will see you on tomorrow's show.